welcome back to Beauty Bee. I am Iris and I am not going to be physically present in the majority of this video, but I thought I would at least pop in at the beginning to provide some context and some explanation for what exactly this video is about. We're looking today at Google Trends for a few pretty well-established brands. These are the brands that I thought of as big deals when I started getting into the beauty community, which was right around the 2014 to start, and I think I really was in by about 2016. So we're looking at some pretty old school brands and their Google Trends. Now, Google keeps track of the searches that have occurred pretty much since their inception in 2004, and you can actually see the relative frequency of a search over time. In this video, I'm going to be using Google searches as a proxy for interest in the brand. Now, interest can be positive or negative, and we're going to see that play out. And there are a few different questions that I think we will likely be able to address through these Google Trends data. First is, when was the brand most popular? Second, the trajectory that the brand is currently on. Is it getting more popular or at least more interesting? Is it getting less interesting, or is it pretty constant over time? And number three, we're going to look at some unusual events that occur in these plots and see if we can correlate them with real life events that are related to the brand. So if that sounds interesting and you don't mind looking at a lot of graphs, I think you should definitely stick around. I think it'll be a good time. The general consensus in the beauty community seems to be that Benefit Cosmetics is pretty boring. That label may not be great for their brand, but it is really, well, beneficial for showcasing some trends that we'll see across most brands. Massive launches and internet-breaking scandals definitely qualify as not boring, but they can make for some really messy graphs. Notice that we see quite a bit of seasonality in the trends over time. Every year, searches for Benefit peak around November or December. I'm almost certain that this is due to holiday shopping, because we'll see that same seasonal trend across most of the other brands as well. There's also an overall trend over time. For years, Benefit saw steady increases in searches, but a few years ago, interest started to wane, and searches for the brand appear to be on a steady decline. Urban Decay is another one that gets the boring stamp, at least recently. The brand released in 1996, so it was fairly well established by the time Google came about in 2004. Interest is more or less constant at the beginning with a gentle upwards trend, but things really pick up speed around 2010. That's not surprising to me. The original Naked palette was released that year, as was the Alice in Wonderland palette, which, though it lacks the infamy of the Naked and the extended Naked cinematic universe, was definitely a cult favorite. Urban Decay was on a roll and interest continued to grow. Until it didn't. Urban Decay hit its peak popularity in 2016, the year of Vice lipstick palettes, the Moon Dust palette, the 20th anniversary palette, and interestingly enough, the second of the Alice in Wonderland palettes. Coincidence? Probably. Since hitting its peak, interest in Urban Decay has plummeted, and searches for the brand are now at a similar level to where they were in about 2012 and 2013. Next, let's take a look at what may well be the weirdest of all these plots. Beauty Blender wouldn't release makeup for a few more years, and it'd be generous to call their first foundation release just a flop. But by the time I wandered into the beauty community, they were already everywhere. Any vaguely egg-shaped makeup sponge was a beauty blender, and I think that's largely to blame for this huge spike we see right around January of 2017. Remember the whole using blank as a beauty blender trend? Yeah, I had done my best to forget that entire genre of videos ever existed, but early 2017 was when they hit their peak. Why did people think anything other than a designated applicator would best apply their foundation? Hint, it was just for views. But I'm sure that Beauty Blender is happy that their sponges are again what comes to mind when people think of their brand name, not applying foundation with any portion of your significant other's anatomy like it would have in 2017. Gross. really talk about the history of the online beauty community without spending at least a little time on Mac? Maybe, but I'm not about to skip them. In 2004, Mac was already getting about half the level of searches that they would at their peak. Compare that to, say, Urban Decay, whose searches start at less than a quarter of where they would at their maximum. The pattern we see in Mac is unusual among these brands. Interest grows gently from 2004 to 2008, and then it tapers off somewhat. I suspect it is due to the 2008 recession, and many in the beauty community likely pulling back somewhat due to increased financial pressures, but I really can't be sure. If anyone knows more or has an alternate explanation, I'd be really interested to hear it. Eventually, though, interest in Mac did start to grow again, and searches hit their max in the winter of 2015. Since then, Mac's searches have fallen, and the recent level of searches have been the lowest since Google began tracking. Now we get into why I keep talking about interest rather than popularity, aka here's where things get significantly more negative. Tarte found that out firsthand in December 2017 and January 2018. Interest had grown in the brand over the previous few years, but those 2 months marked the highest number of searches for the brand. Why? Facetape, or more precisely, Facetape's lack of a shade range, releasing 2 entire ranges, poor wording there on my part, of foundation with just a couple of shades that might work for people with deeper complexions. Not a great look. Releasing them on MLK Day, really not a great look. Tarte got a ton of blowback, and we can see it in their Google Trends. Since then, interest has continued to fall. Our final brand has controversy to blame for its Mac searches as well. I was going to ask if anyone had any guesses, but then I realized that I have the company name in the upper left corner. It's Too Faced. I know that the company has been around since 1998, so it doesn't surprise me that there were some searches for the company quite early on, but I really can't explain the pattern that we see over the first year or so of data. Jumping from 75% of maximum searches in 1 month to 0 the next. If you have any clue what could be happening here, I would love to hear it. The 2 points that I found most interesting, though, are the peaks. I've already spoiled that they're controversies rather than really exciting releases or incredible charity work, so let's get into it. The first comes in January of 2019. That's the Rich Lives Matter birthday cake, which, read the room, Jared. That is the biggest spike that Too Faced ever saw, but they almost matched it a year later. In January 2020, NYX Tutorials came out as transgender, and Jared Blandino's sister made transphobic remarks about the YouTuber. The sister ended up being fired from her position at the company, but it didn't stop Too Faced from getting a huge number of searches over that month. I think that wraps up our discussion, at least for today, of brands Google Trends. I really enjoyed making this video, and if you guys are interested, I would be so up for doing a couple more rounds. I do have some ideas for some other topics that could be interesting to explore in this way. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing if you did. Already looking forward to next time. Bye!